All right, we'll come back into session. We're in public comment. And this is still pertaining to the meetings and records. Is there any other people in the room to comment on this? Representative Ottman. Very nice to see you. Microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. It's good to be here. Pepper Ottman, House District 34 representative, but I'm here today just to attend your meeting. Very important topics, very interesting. And since I could come, I thought I would. It's good to see you all. A lot of really good points I thought were made pertaining to Freedom of Information Act and public meetings and things. So I just had a couple things to thank you for and a couple things possibly to reiterate that I believe that are very important. So first off, I wanted to talk about redaction. I think that needs to be addressed when we put out, and one of the things, and I don't know the statute inside and out, so please forgive me for that. But I did want to say, as far as the statute goes, I really believe there needs to be a framework. And then I guess it would go down to the counties and to the municipalities. And that's where I have a question with this particular topic. From what I've heard in the entities that I've talked to, small towns, 125 people, or a little bit larger, 500, is that they all do it a little bit differently. And so if there could be a framework of, and you've mentioned it, and one of the city managers for Riverton, actually, city manager, had said that they have a policy now. So what my thought is that that's great. But if we could somehow make it more standardized across the state, I think that that would help with the ombudsman job. And boy, I really appreciate all the work that she's done. And I remember when we talked about that in corps when I was on corporations. So what I would encourage is somehow that we could look at a standardization, whether it be time, initial time, pages, whatever it is, to set up a framework so that the different entities that are going to be approached about this, that they could then go to that and fill in and have a standardized form that they can put on their official websites or whatever, so that they know. Because as it was brought up, one place may have a lot more business, but they also may be able to have a part-time person or a full-time person on staff. Another place has one person in the office to do everything, and they might only be able to do that part-time. But then there's the time element, but also time is of the essence a lot of times. So we have to take into consideration how important these documents are and how quickly they're needed. So that was just some thoughts. One of the other things is that it was mentioned that if there was a problem, and I was so pleased that Ombudsman Potter was comfortable enough and is doing a wonderful job to say that there is a lot of pushback and that should not be at all. If it is law that people have the right for freedom of information, then it should be made that is amenable to both parties, those requesting and also those providing. And when it was said that there could be litigation, who's going to end up paying for that? The local governments, the state government, the county government, and then look at the time and waste there is too. So I believe that framework and really requiring entities to provide that information to their constituents. The other thing is it was mentioned, and I'll finish with this. It was mentioned that if there was litigation or a problem, that people could go to their county attorney. In this county, we have been told that the county attorney works for the county government. So if there was some sort of litigation or problem with the clerk's office or the assessor's office or something, just saying, the county attorney would not step in because they are there to defend. And this was a case here in Fremont. They're there to defend the county government, not the public. So that is an issue too that I believe we need to consider. So I'll stand for any questions. Thank you for the time and opportunity.
Thank you, Representative. Questions of the committee? Yes, Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman Knapp. Representative Ottman, you're talking about a time frame for these requests to be filled in. How would that work? Would you, I mean, it would depend on the size of the agency you're asking for, and would they have to think this through? I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Okay.
Representative Ottman.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, you know, that is one of the primary issues because of the size of the offices. They vary so much from a one-person office where even the mayor is not usually there to an office that is fully staffed. So what I would think is that if it is something, and I believe it was mentioned, that's something that we can just look up right here, that we would say, okay, if this research or if this document would take up to an hour to process, free. If it takes 2 to 4 hours, this would be it. If it, and however many pages or, because honestly, this is something that the public is entitled to, but also we want to keep those people that would sit there at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, I want 98 pages of stuff 5 times. We have to take that into consideration as well. So I believe that the main things would be the time element, the quantity of the material, the importance of it, but also, and I just had a thought in it. Let me see. Oh, and also to put in, and it came back, to put in some teeth for the ombudsman. Because my goodness, is she's going to do her job and hold that very important position, working for both entities to keep that out of the court and out of problems. She needs to be able to say, this is what I do, and this is the response that you should have, or else. You know, and I believe that that needs to go. I mean, that position should have some authority other than talking to people. So anyways, those are my thoughts. Did that answer?
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Lottman, you were talking about in the case of the litigation, that the county attorney would work for the county, especially in a case where the county was the plaintiff, or the defendant. Would it be appropriate for us to look at possibly doing something that would reimburse attorney fees for someone who had to go against the county?
Mr.
Representative
Chairman,
Ottman.
Representative Brown, you know, that's a thought. That is the thought that people might be reimbursed. But what I would hope is that giving the ombudsman the authority to intercede before that step is there, that would possibly alleviate that need. Also to, maybe we need to define the job description of the county attorney. They are an elected official. So that's kind of a gray area in my mind when I looked it up to say, well, yes, but yes. So maybe that's something that could be looked at too. I'm not sure.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead and come on up. They're itching to go. Go ahead and identify yourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Bob Bonner. I am the owner and publisher and editor-in-chief of the Newsletter Journal in Newcastle, Wyoming. Weston County getting a lot of airtime in front of corporations today or this weekend. So thank you for that. With me is Miss Sarah Squires. I think some of you guys know, representative of the local newspapers down here in Fremont County. By way of full disclosure, I don't live in Newcastle anymore. In 2019, I moved to Durango, Colorado. I work for a school district down there and then run the newspaper in Wyoming remotely. Economics of the business dictated a change in my life. So, but I am still active. I'm a past president of the Wyoming Press Association. I'm still very active with that organization. And I've been active with the Wyoming State Legislature in consideration of this topic for probably the last 15 years, I believe, in my role with the Press Association. I participated on working groups with some of the associations who appeared here this morning in 2012, and then a couple years after that, when we took a pretty comprehensive look at these statutes and some others having to do with government transparency. And then I was involved in the 2018 interim and the legislation that was eventually passed that created the ombudsman's position and was passed and went into effect in July of 2019. So I'll offer a little history to the committee. I also sent y'all, I emailed yesterday late afternoon, a very significant size package, 55 pages, I think it was, with a little bit of history, probably about a 4-page summary from myself of some recent history I've had with difficulties in seeing this law followed and enforced, and 50 pages of examples of news stories from around the state since this law was updated in 2019 of violations by public bodies, all of them local. This is no longer, I think, really an issue. I think you heard that earlier today. Not necessarily an issue with state government entities. I think they've largely addressed whatever issues existed years ago, but local governments are still struggling mightily to meet the spirit and intent and letter of this law in Wyoming. So I know it's been a long day. I do want to be thorough. I will try not to go over any ground that's already been covered. When I do, I promise I'll be just trying to give a little more depth and a little more clarity to the things that have been said. One other thing that I failed to leave out in my introduction, I was also on the school board in Weston County for 12 years and was a member of the Wyoming School Boards Association. That's why I worked with the working groups and the associations to try and find some common ground on these laws for a number of years. What I will say is that I do thank you for allowing us the opportunity to debate these laws and to re-examine them because it's going to give me an opportunity to right my own wrong and fix a mistake I made 7 years ago down here in Lander when I agreed with the associations and some of the state entities that it was appropriate in times when there were excessive and extreme public records requests to assess a fee for the construction or retrieval of records. And we're hearing about the data miners and some of those entities. And I agreed that in those cases, it wasn't right to cripple a small local government with exorbitant records requests that were coming from out of state that did not serve the public interest in Wyoming. I agreed that there needed to be a remedy for local governments. However, in the 7 years since that discussion took place and the 6 years since that law went into effect, I think it's been abused considerably. The changes that were made to the law opened the door to a great deal of abuse because of the fact that the ombudsman's office really has no teeth. I think that's why you're seeing more and more cases be referred to her office because the abuse has just become more widespread in 6 years. And it's a chance to right that wrong now because the deck is clearly stacked against the public. And, you know, you heard from the associations this morning, they all reference that, you know, they provide this public records and open meetings trainings to their members. However, the ombudsman's caseload continues to go up. And as I referenced, I sent you all 50 pages of news stories about violations, admitted or proven violations of this act by local governments in Wyoming the last 6 years. I think I have some pretty good explanations as to why that has happened. First, and I just have this series of A's. The first being accountability. I think transparency is the best guarantor of good government. And I'm going to suggest 3 remedies at the end of this presentation, actually a 4th that came to mind this morning while the groups were presenting. But I think one of the first remedies that needs to be made in the law is the term willfully and knowingly violates is in the law right now. That was done as an acknowledgement to there was always claims of confusion on the part of local officials that they didn't understand the law, and I'd submit to you today that that's the case because they would really just assume not understand the law because they don't want to comply with it. We don't give citizens, if you're driving down the street and you didn't notice a speed limit sign and you speed, ignorance is not an excuse to get off of the ticket there. If you accidentally wander into the wrong hunting area, we don't allow people off the hook for that. I think it's inappropriate to allow our leaders, our community leaders, to use an ignorance excuse to avoid following the law. And so I'd like to ask the committee to consider removing the willfully and knowingly language from current statute because I think it's just far too big a loophole to overcome. Our commission themselves and some of the debates I've had with them and some of the issues, I also have one of the open cases in front of the ombudsman right now related to the election issue that occurred in Weston County in November 2024. It's been over 100 days and I am still waiting for those records, which the ombudsman said I was entitled to. I'm still waiting for the entirety of that record to be produced for me. Our commissioners in discussions over that records request have stated, and I provided in the documents I sent to you a link to the YouTube video, have stated that they would like the legislature to give them more clarity on this issue because they feel that they're confused. And that was a commission that said that they got trained by the County Commission Association on this in 2022. And the ultimate reason I think the biggest difficulty with this, and I'll refer again to the associations and the other places where our local government officials, where they get advice from, is from entities and people who don't represent the public. And this was alluded to earlier, they represent the actual county, city governments, the actual elected and public officials. County attorneys, city attorneys, they represent the boards. They don't represent the public. And the same is true of the associations. And I don't know if there's any attorneys on the committee, but acknowledging that they represent the boards, I think, my daughter's getting ready to start law school. I think the first lesson she's going to get is the first piece of advice you give your client as an attorney is to shut up. And so asking attorneys to advise on transparency issues, it just runs against their nature to actually advise for more transparency. And boards know this, and so they continually go to their attorneys to look for reasons and excuses to find their way around the law. I'd submit that and there is no consequence for an attorney who gives advice. All those 50 pages of news stories, and there's more. Those were just the first ones that I came up with. Those 50 pages of news stories, they were all advised by attorneys and associations in their approach to the open meeting and public records laws. And in every case, they violated. And there was no consequence for the attorneys or for the associations who provided them with the bad advice. I will agree with the association's position, everything you heard for 3 hours this morning, that they are very, very valuable. As a former elected official in this state, as a former local official, the resources that they made available to me, the networking opportunities. I went to every state meeting. I went to all the regional meetings. I read all the emails. They were valuable to me, especially as a new school board member. However, I will say that there are accountability issues with the associations. And I do believe the additional remedy that I didn't include in the packet, but I'll reveal to you now, I know there's discussion about maybe controlling the amount of taxpayer money that can go to those entities. I would ask that the committee consider a suggestion to place those associations that represent public officials and are funded by taxpayer dollars to, in statute, place them under the open meetings and public records laws of the state of Wyoming. They currently are not. And if you look at the websites, Wyoming Association of Municipality, County Commissioners Association, the Wyoming School Boards Association, if you're a member of the public and you go to those websites, you cannot find the minutes of their meetings, you cannot find their budgets, you cannot find the cost that each of their entities pays for membership or for events or for materials or for services. So the groups that claim that they're training public officials on this law do not come under the law either. And I know the legislature's got an exemption, but we'll deal with that in about 10 years. It's taken me 15 years to get the local government part right. But I would ask that the committee consider that remedy as well, because currently there's no accountability from those groups. You're right, that is public funds, and they represent and communicate exclusively with public officials, but the public has no idea what any of them are doing. Finally, as a final point that I'd like to make for why I think the situation has only gotten worse instead of gotten better, is that the law, the way it's currently written, encourages local governments to take an antiquated approach to their public records keeping. By that, I mean they've had 7 years since the last conversation. There was 7 years in the 6 or 7 years in the conversation prior to that. And many of these local governments are still operating websites that contain no information whatsoever. There's no requirement, there's no motivation. Quite honestly, given the amount of time that's elapsed since the last time I was in Lander having this conversation, I know my own website's been updated several times, and we include a lot more information on there. There's no reason for the public to have to request a lot of this information anymore. But a lot of the entities have not advanced to the point where they're just automatically putting things on their website. In Weston County, as a matter of fact, they went backwards. During COVID, they were putting audio recordings of each commission meeting on the website. After COVID, they just stopped doing it. These local governments have actually become less transparent in the last 5 years. And I think if there's more teeth in the law, and if you remedy a situation where they just send the public away, send the public away, send the public away, by forcing them to actually comply with these records requests, that's one way to manage the cost of records requests in government. Just make your records available, scan your vouchers and put them online. Make your records available to the public, record your meetings, put them online. A lot of things the legislature's already done, a lot of things state agencies are already doing. And I think that's why state agencies aren't having the conflicts that local governments are. And I think with more teeth in the law, local governments will be encouraged to actually modernize, organize, and update their own operations. And one other point, I do think the $750 fine that can be assessed is that needs to be looked at, and I think it needs to be beefed up. As an employee of a public institution in the state of Colorado, where the fine is $3,500, I can tell you that they take requests and open meetings laws far more seriously down there. The higher fine is actually motivation enough that there's a private attorney in Colorado who makes a living off of just trolling local governments and making sure they don't break this law. And so they take it very, very seriously. And I have never in a couple of years of working for public entities in Colorado been put in a position where I felt conflicted between my beliefs that transparency is important and that the entity that I represent wasn't operated on a transparent level. And I believe that is because the penalty is higher. So quickly, I am trying to keep it short. A couple of my own local experiences. Again, the $750 fine. The Newsletter Journal had to sue the Weston County Commissioners. You heard a reference this morning to the training they received from the County Commission Association in 2022 on public meetings and open records. They only sought out that training 3 years after the law was changed in 2019, by the way. They only sought that training after the Newsletter Journal and a group of 4 citizens was forced to sue the commissioners for filling a vacancy in the legislature, filling a House District 2 vacancy by use of a secret ballot in a public meeting. Instead of voting publicly and saying, I vote for this candidate, they each of the commissioners, and there were actually 3 counties, but we just sued the county the newspaper existed in, 3 county commissions that voted by secret ballot to nominate Representative Williams to fill the vacancy left when Representative Hunt vacated his seat. When the public asked them if that was appropriate for them to do so, they immediately used the exemption of potential litigation and refused to even have a conversation about it in open meeting about them following that process of the vote. We were forced to sue them to get them to acknowledge that the secret ballot was illegal, and a group text thread that they have been operating that we discovered in the process because one of the commissioners revealed it to us they had to acknowledge that that was also illegal. They came in the morning of the court hearing, and I will again, to provide a little clarity to something that was said already today, this did not cost the county a dime. The Johnson County attorney represented them pro bono. They will do that for each other. Local governments support each other in that manner when there's a conflict of interest. So the Johnson County attorney represented them pro bono. It did not cost Weston County anything. My bills totaled $15,000. And on the morning that we went into court, their attorney approached my attorney and said, we will concede that the secret ballot was wrong, that the text messages were against the law. And I went ahead and, on the advice of my attorney, reached the plea agreement with them. We didn't go in front of a judge. And of course, I waived the $750 fee as part of that plea agreement. In reference to my more recent difficulty, the open case in front of the ombudsman still, following the difficulties which you all heard about yesterday with the general election in 2024, I had a concern and some residents had a concern. The only reason we caught that mistake, I don't know if this was made clear yesterday, in the counting of those ballots was because it was an uncontested race. They all shifted to undervotes, which made it very obvious that something had happened in the count. Had that mistake been made at any other time in a contested election, it would have been impossible to tell that a mistake had been made. I had seen previous elections over the course of 4 to 6 years before where I was surprised by the result. But who wants to be that guy? Just because you don't get the result you want, you can't complain. And in one of them, I had even noted that I thought the undervotes were quite high. And so when this mistake was discovered and denied initially in Weston County, I then was concerned that this same mistake had happened in a previous election. So I made a records request for the documents for communications between the county clerk and the ballot machine company to determine had she ever received multiple sets of ballots before, which is what caused the mistake this time. And that is a request that's still open. I have not been provided with all of the communications and all of the attachments to those emails that I requested. It's now been over 100 days. So that's just the background on that one right now. Quickly, my remedies that I'd like to suggest, one of the things that's been abused the most was in 2019, we extended the deadline to meter records request from 10 days to 30 days, and governments have defaulted to that. It doesn't matter what you ask them for, they make you wait a full 30 days. I had a school board chairman, the school board chairman who succeeded me in Weston County, look at me and tell me, the law says we have 30 days, you'll wait 30 days to get it. So I would suggest taking that back down to 10 days with a 3-day response time to acknowledge that you have received the request. 7 days, 7 business days is probably twice as many as they need. So I would ask that you consider acknowledgement of request in 3 business days and 10 days to produce a record unless the government entity gets approval from the ombudsman to take more time. The second remedy I'd suggest, I think, is a great and very, very simple way to give more teeth to the ombudsman's position, is to reverse the flow of information in cases that come to the ombudsman. Right now, the entire burden is on the public. Governments can just tell us no, and what the law has created is the ombudsman then becomes an additional piece of bureaucracy that the public has to work through. That they hide behind, they buy time behind. The ombudsman has done a great job and has supported us on our records request right from the very start. But the fact that she has no real teeth has meant that they could delay that. I would suggest that the easiest remedy to that is force governments to go to the ombudsman instead of the public. If government wants to charge a fee of any kind, they should be required to get the permission of the ombudsman first, instead of forcing the public to go and get the ombudsman to waive the fee. Because the one thing governments have lost track of in the last 6 years is that producing public records is their job. If you're a public records custodian, the taxpayers have paid you to take care of the records and to produce them when the taxpayers want to see them. And so governments, we've seen Weston County, in response to my request for election materials, finally passed the fee schedule 6 years after the law was passed, and they allow 15 minutes of free time before they will start charging you for a requested record. They can hide in the bathroom for 15 minutes and then start charging people money for something that belongs to the public already. So I think the strongest remedy is to make government go through the ombudsman to get permission to charge a fee at all. And because the ombudsman clearly understands the law better than local governments have demonstrated so far, and to take longer than 10 days to produce a record. The third remedy I'd suggest is to increase the penalty. And then the bonus I offered you, because I'm here to serve and I want to help, is to put the state associations that serve public officials and use taxpayers' money to put them under the open meetings and public records laws, and to make them post specific records. I'd suggest minutes, budgets, and cost per entity on their website publicly. And with that, I'm sorry, it took probably longer than you guys would like, but I'm open for questions.
Questions from the committee? Yes, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So, thank you, Mr. Bonner. It's always good to hear from you, and appreciate all the work you've done through the years on several fronts. So down in Colorado, I assume that this $3,500 figure for those who might violate the intention of the law is a felony, is it not? And does that include some jail time? Because in Wyoming, we have these benchmarks, and you go above 750 and you're talking felony in Wyoming. So just curious.
Mr. Bonner.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Senator Landon. You know what? I can't answer that question. I do not believe it's a felony. I think, as a matter of fact, I think it's civil because the award goes, the attorney who pursues these cases claims the award. So my district actually experienced that. I think it was an open meetings violation. I think they were outside. They exercised an exemption to open meetings to go into executive session that they didn't have a right to. And they got a letter from him, and I was told by my supervisors a year after the fact when they hired me, because I said in my interview, here is my concern. I won't lie for you, and I won't do this for you. And so they told me about it, and they said, oh yeah, we got the letter and we just cut him a check. And apparently that was sort of the practice of governments down there. I'm not suggesting that that's the perfect remedy. There's other problems with Colorado's law where I don't think it's so good. But again, the idea that there's teeth in it. You heard this morning, the $750 fine, as far as I know, it's kind of like No Child Left Behind. I never saw a single school get closed or a single teacher get fired over it. This $750 fine, sort of the same thing. Even at the end of the day, to save the court's time and save myself a little bit of money, I let 5 people who admitted to wrongdoing off the hook on the $750 fine. So some sort of penalty needs to be in place, and it needs to be high enough to motivate governments to not violate the law and to understand it better. There's no motivation in there for governments to understand the law better right now. They just love to plead ignorance to it, and motivation for people to actually pursue the monetary settlement, I think.
Yes, Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bob, appreciate you coming to explain some of these matters. Can I ask, in your history, and we probably need to make some adjustments here, but when you visit with these public officials, you go right up front to them before we go to the courts and say, could we have this information? Is it just a lack of cooperation? I'd like to follow up too, Mr. Chairman. Is it just a lack of cooperation in the early stages?
Mr. Bonner.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Dockstader, I'd like to say that I'm a really nice guy, but honestly, 20 years of battle over this, my frustration and patience level has been worn pretty thin. I will say specifically the secret ballot case, we asked an open meeting, members of the public asked an open meeting for them to discuss it, and the county commission, on advice of their attorney, said this is potential litigation. So they went into executive session, discussed it amongst themselves, came out and looked at the public and said, due to potential litigation, we're not going to comment on this publicly. That's the only suit I've ever filed. And as a matter of fact, the recent request on elections is the only time I've sought the ombudsman's assistance. Other than that, no, I'll have conversations, and admittedly, 10 years ago, there were more cordial conversations. I'll freely admit that this has become a bone of contention in Weston County, because I don't back down on it. And so it's become a game with local governments to see what you can get away with. And it's unfortunate. And so generally I retaliate by letting the public knows what's going on. And that makes me unpopular in some circles, and it fills city council chambers and county commission rooms sometimes. But they've been worked out locally through that process of us acting as the fourth estate, I guess, for lack of better explanation, and saying, well, public, this is what's going on. We think you have a right to this, but your city council, your school board, whoever doesn't. And the people of Weston County are pretty well educated on these issues after 20 years. And so we've been able to handle a lot of them locally, but it's getting hard. And like I said, there's been significant monetary cost and personal cost for myself to continue to repeat this. And so I am here today asking for some consideration and some relief from the legislature.
Follow up.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, just to follow up there, and it's urge you to continue to do that. Full disclosure, we have different sets of media that I'm associated with, and if we go to them on the print side and say it's not working, then we ask them to come down and join the morning radio show and have an open conversation, and that has been very successful. Yeah, with that, Mr. Chairman, I need to excuse myself to our co-chairs, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Chairman, no co-chairs, into the body. The electric co-op that I serve on a board on, we're honoring our employees tonight at a dinner, so I got to get over to the west side of the state.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I won't belabor long, committee, but there's a couple things here that I think are worth our discussion. We worked very hard in 2018 and 19 to arrive where we are today. And if it's not working, I think we owe it to ourselves to see what we can do to make it work. I do have this concern as a former journalist, a daily newspaper journalist in my early days, in my early profession. I am behind you 100%, Mr. Bonner. So the piece, though, that gives me pause is the culture that we find ourselves in now. And I have spoken to our local folks, and it has deteriorated at the front counters. Some of our officials aren't being treated very well, to be quite honest. I think it's a problem that we need to be aware of, and it may find itself into legislation at some point just on that front. So I wonder if you think that might be part of the contentiousness. There's a lot more volatility out there, a lot more angst and even anger. And I worry from the public agency standpoint that there's just this inundation of more and more and more requests. So would you acknowledge, I guess, that there's got to be a balance in there, does there not? You can't expect our public employees, we don't want to pay them to just be doing that. They've got another job to do. Does that make sense? Maybe you can comment on that for me,
Mr. Bonner.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon, thank you for that. Yeah, I can 100% acknowledge that, and I acknowledged it 7 years ago is why I conceded that there needed to be something in statute to allow a fee to be assessed. When it's in the part I think that the ombudsman understands far more than the associations and far more than the local governments themselves is except when release of that information is in the public interest. And I think the two personal accounts that I've given you of probably my biggest recent battles on this, clear in both of those instances, the public had an interest in knowing how one group of public officials appointed a legislator to represent them on their behalf. And I do believe the people of Weston County there's definitely a public interest in knowing if their past election results have been accurate and if they've got the right people in office in Weston County. And so that's why I suggest, yeah, I think there does need to be a balance and there needs to be a remedy. But right now, the balance is off in that all the burden is on the public. And I believe if you force government to go through the ombudsman instead of forcing the public to go through the ombudsman, I trust the ombudsman to make good decisions in those instances, especially if you give the office some teeth. I trust the ombudsman to make good decisions in those instances and create the balance that you're looking for. And if I could, Mr. Chairman, just to extend a little bit, and this will go to one of the stories in the packet is one that Ms. Squires put together from Fremont County, a couple of school boards down here that met via text messages and other electronic communications to draft correspondence with the legislature, to lobby the legislature, and to present a united front. And unfortunately, that's one of the things we run into with open meeting violations, is that they are oftentimes violated because boards are uncomfortable with not being unanimous. They feel this need to be unanimous about everything. Or one of the terms I hate is get their ducks in a row. And to be quite honest, I think the thing that would really go to fixing the situation you're talking about, Senator Landon, is if our leaders go ahead and do a better job of demonstrating civil discourse and the ability to agree to disagree. The school boards down here, I'm sorry, when I read these stories from Fremont County, they did a disservice to the communities by not showing the communities that there were two sides of those issues, and there were valid sides, and that people had a right to present those points. And this idea that a school board has to be unanimous in a correspondence with the legislature or a city council or a county commission, that I think is what's led to the deterioration of civil discourse and the lack of respect that you talk about. And I've certainly felt the lack of respect coming across the counter the other way in my courthouse. So I do think that needs to be improved. But again, I think sunshine is the absolute best cure for that.
Senator Landon, follow up. Senator Bonner.
Well, follow up based off that discussion, because it seems maybe there's other more significant factors at play than our laws, but you know, the legislature is famous for disagreeing whether it be civil or not. And it seems like a lot of our local boards, school boards especially for whatever reason, are always presenting that united front, yet they're more tightly regulated than the legislature is. So I'm wondering, are there other factors that may be more important when it comes to this dynamic outside of the statutes that we're considering here?
Mr. Bonner.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Bonner, yes, there's a very big factor. It's a heck of a lot harder to do it in your hometown with the people that you see in the grocery store that sit next to you at church. Your kids are on the same football team. It's a heck of a lot harder to be honest, to be a little contentious, to say things that are unpopular in that small community. That's something I learned as an elected official and as a newspaper man in Newcastle. It's a little easier, I'm sorry, to be in chambers in Cheyenne and say some of those things, or in committee rooms in Cheyenne, because it doesn't trickle all the way back to the public. So I think that's a very significant factor that, yes, in a lot of ways. And like I said, I do think the associations provide a lot of value. And I value what local elected officials do. Their job in a lot of ways is harder than yours. And I think that's why they need to be regulated on this front more, because yeah, it'd sure just be a heck of a lot easier to be able to go and say what upsets people in a closed room than to do it publicly. And the same thing goes with public records. So I think that's a huge factor, but I think the accountability and transparency still needs to be there, probably even more important than it is.
Follow up. Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Lucas, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bonner, thank you for the information. I appreciate that. I just wanted to clarify, you had said that you would like to see associations that serve public officials and get public funds would be under this act and subject to those disclosure or provision rules. Would you include with that associations that provide services to government agencies or employees? I guess I'm searching here. I'm trying to determine whether this is just a strictly public funds thing, or whether are we talking about a tax status here also? I'm digging a little.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Bonner.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lucas, that would probably take a few more conversations. No, my primary thrust is those entities and agencies and associations that represent elected officials and are financed by taxpayer dollars, by public funds. How far you'd reach with that. I mean, I'm pretty upset my election request for election records. I also made to ES&S, the ballot machine company, and they refused to provide me with any documentation, say that's up to the local governments. Now, I think their sole purpose is to serve the public, and so I'm a little frustrated and impatient about that, but I have no remedy for that. So, no, I think it would be hard enough. That conversation's going to be tough enough to place WHAM and the School Boards Association and the Commissioners Association under this law that I don't know that I certainly am not up for lifting much more than that right now.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Oh, follow up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Mr. Bonner, would you be satisfied if these associations were just provided basic financial statements and minutes on their websites?
Mr. Bonner?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lucas, yes, but I think language should be included in statute that places them under the laws that they counsel their membership to follow. I mean, it was a little tough for me to sit and listen this morning to each one of them say that they provided advice to their members on this topic, but none of them have to follow. And again, I know the legislature's got your exemptions. That's another lift I don't want to do right now. But no, I think place them under that statute, and then within that area of statute where you make that amendment to statute to include them, I think a direct stipulation of, yes, their financials. I think that, vouchers, whatever you want to call it, spending over $500, it could mirror the city statutes, and the ones followed by the county. Budgets should be there and minutes should be there. And then I think the unique thing for the associations would be to post Weston County's total spending with the Weston County Commissioners Association, their fees, their dues, their event participation fees for state convention or whatever. And then if there's any materials or services that there's an additional charge to the membership for, I think that should be reflected. I think the public should be able to see my city council and mayor paid this much to get these services from the Wyoming Association of Municipalities. And I think it would encourage more citizens to actually go to those websites and understand some of the valuable work these associations do. I think it could serve the associations well to do this, honestly, in the long run. I know it's probably not a real comfortable situation here in that suggestion now, but I do think it's a good remedy for a lot of what you heard in the session and this morning.
Follow. Chairman Case.
Thank you. I'm very sensitive to the time and the fact that we have another topic after this one and that you all have to drive a long ways, okay? It's important. Let's keep that in mind. So I'm just going to throw out a straw man that the other people, that you and the other people can address, and it would be that we ask for a draft of legislation that kind of follows your suggestion of that try to implement a 3 days response, 10 days to provide records, and 30 days with the exception with the ombudsman's permission. And then I was wondering if this might work, and I'm just doing this so that all the witnesses can address this, is grab the fee schedule from A&I and use that as the basic fee schedule. But that if a local entity wishes to deviate from the fee schedule, they also can go to the ombudsman to get that to happen. So they can get more time and they can get more fees. And then I would add that the ombudsman, if we gave them two powers, maybe the civil penalty part, we give the ombudsman the ability to levy a civil penalty. Now that happens in other places in the law, and think about that. And I'm open about the issue of associations. That may be a different bill, but we could throw it in there that if when elected officials meet in an association capacity, that they fall under it. I got to think about that more, but I'm willing to have that kind of put out there so we think about it. Would that get at a lot of things, Mr. Bonner? And I want the other witnesses to kind of talk to this too.
Mr. Bonner?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, it will, I do think one of the things that I would really like to see is that prior to assessing any fee, ombudsman approval is given to government to seek. Even, I do agree that universal adoption of A&I's fee schedule would probably serve the state very well. But I would still like to see that stipulation, because the thing local governments just have not grasped is that if it is in the public's interest, there should be no fee charged. I was assessed a $375 fee for my request for election records.
Yeah.
There was no itemization. It was just, here, you owe us $375 for, you're gonna get this. And I said, no, I don't. And I asked the ombudsman, she said, no, he doesn't, because she understood the public interest part. And so I would like that to be included. I
Mr.
guess.
Chairman, I think right now the ombudsman can waive the fees, and I would not take that away. I'm just saying that she would have to grant permission for someone to exceed the fees of the A&I. So I just want to hear people address that so we can get our arms around something.
Senator Landon?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I think the chairman's spot on. I certainly support everything you indicated. Senator, I wondered if you had an interest in looking at that $750 fee or penalty, and whether or not we want to consider increasing it. I'm not advocating. That was one of the things that was suggested by Mr. Bonner.
Mr. Chairman,
I don't know that I want to follow Colorado in any thing, but maybe they hit on something there. I don't know.
Chairman Case?
well, Mr. Chairman, I think we could do you know, 2 levels of fees on the civil penalty, or a range of fees, and let that play out. You know, say $750 to $2,000, and the only reason, and that maybe put some guidelines about when the higher fee is warranted.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I had a question on the fees too, because, it's even in raising the penalty, if the fee is against an agency or a governmental agency, again, it's the taxpayer paying for an affront to the taxpayer. And so I'm wondering if that civil fee shouldn't be assessed towards both the governmental agency and a personal civil penalty.
We could talk.
And that might be an option.
so that'd be in the case, Mr. Chairman, of like someone that's egregious in their records request, trying to manipulate or harm government in some way, harm the public interest. Is that what you're thinking?
Both on both ends. I think the individual, for instance, if you were up against a school board, they refused to grant your access for those records. Not only would the government be assessed a fee, but those individuals could possibly be assessed that penalty as well.
Mr. Chairman, if
Yeah,
I could
Mr. Bonner.
respond to that, I just want to agree with Senator Landon that, yeah, I by no means advocate for entire adoption of what Colorado has done there. 3,500 is pretty steep. I was thinking, I was going to go ahead and fire that shot high and then come right back down to 1,500 if anybody asked me to full disclosure. And also I do believe, at least in the cases that I'm aware of, the penalty is assessed against the entity, which I've always been, that's the taxpayers suing the taxpayers. And I've always been uncomfortable with that. So that one, I'm certainly open to more conversation and would be very willing to participate in those conversations. But I think Senator Case's idea about giving the ombudsman the authority to apply that fine, the current fine would probably be enough in a lot of cases if it was just more present and hovering over them more. Because like I said, we've never seen the $750 one assessed as far as I know.
Okay, Senator Bonner, and then Representative Brown, I saw you too, but Senator Bonner, go ahead.
Right, and so I think that's, another potential solution I want to bring up is many states allow the prevailing side to recover their legal fees. I wonder if $15,000 worth of legal fees for a $750 fine might be a pretty significant deterrent for most folks. And so maybe that should be in the discussion as well. Maybe that's just a one-sided thing, if the citizen prevails, that government entity needs to cover the legal fees, and maybe the opposite shouldn't be true. I don't know. And then something really interesting that Nebraska does, offers for the opportunity for removal or impeachment of an official if they don't comply, and they sort of have that adverse attitude, I think we've heard. And so I presume that would follow our regular process for such things. But other remedies out there that could remove some barriers. I think that's good. So.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Case, along with your proposal, and Mr. Bonner, I'd like for you to weigh in on this. You're talking about attorneys who give clients advice that violate the law. I would like to see some kind of penalty for attorneys who give advice that violate the law. So.
Mr. Bonner, comment?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, boy, there's a whole lot of nights when you and I could have sat around and gone, yeah. It cost us $15,000 to get the secret ballot acknowledged as a violation of the law and the sequential text messaging. I knew, I'm a big boy, I knew going into it what it was going to cost us. So I certainly would welcome at least an examination of whether we want to allow members of the public to recoup attorney's fees, because that's a significant cost. And like I said, it doesn't cost, you know, Johnson County pro bono represented our commissioners in that case. So the penalty for attorneys who give bad advice, I think, you know,
We'd have to do it for all of them.
yeah, yeah, that's a slippery slope. Like they're like, and notice I said night, we'd be going, yeah, because at the end of a long day, I'm on that train. But really, I think it's incumbent, and I've often lectured, editorialized this locally, that, you know, it really is the public officials who need to remember, who need to acknowledge that that attorney is serving them and not the public. And need to be able to look, guess what, this is part of the reason some of the national debate right now about, oh, I can't believe the chief executive is pushing back against the courts. It's three equal branches. They're supposed to push back at each other all the time. And far too often I've run into local governments who said, well, our attorney said this is the advice. And they refuse to even listen to my perspective on it. Even knowing that I've been testifying on these matters in front of the legislature for more than a decade. I think public officials, and if we address it by putting more teeth in the law, giving the ombudsman some teeth, public officials need to be reminded that they don't have to take their attorney's advice. The attorney works for them. And far too often you hear, oh, well, the attorney said we couldn't. No, the attorney doesn't get to say you can't. Your job is to tell your attorney, we want to do this. You need to tell us how to do it legally. Far too often, that swings away from the public right now. And so, no, I think consequences for attorneys is a slippery slope that I'm not ready to get on. But I think some of the changes that Senator Case laid out in statute will encourage public officials to hold their attorneys accountable and to remember that the attorneys work for them and not the other way around.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I just don't want the committee to forget, nor do I want to forget the flip side of the coin, which I tried to articulate, being a former journalist who then turned into a public administration official. I don't want to forget the folks who are doing the work of our state too, and our local governments. You know, they have jobs to do, and we've got to be very careful that we don't open this door where hundreds of people think they just go in there and inundate these offices with requests that they just simply cannot meet. And so we always, I think we would do well to just remember there are some limitations in there somewhere. I'm not prepared today to even go there, but I want to be sure that we remember that those public agency folks have jobs to do, and we've got to be reasonable in there somewhere, Mr. Chairman. So we can have that visit, you know, at a later time.
We draft this bill, we'll have that visit.
Yeah,
That sounds good. Okay, so good suggestion from Chairman Case. We do have quite a few people listed on our schedule online. So let's go to those people for public comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Thought you were just back up there for a second.
Thank you, Chairman Knapp, Chairman Case, and members of the committee. I will keep my comments brief out of respect for your time. I know you have a lot of important work to get to today. I want to reflect on a very quick story that I think cuts to the heart of what we're talking about here with regards to transparency and accountability and what that really means in our communities. A number of years ago, I was about 1,000 miles away working in a rural county of Minnesota under a set of statutes that governed fees that worked the way Wyoming's did years ago, in that I could inspect documents for free. And it was only when I asked for copies that I had to pay something. And I was working on an investigation, trying to figure out where about $3 million in taxpayer money had come from that ended up in a slush account moved there by county staff members for a new building that had never been voted on or discussed by elected officials. It took me a long time. I had to review a lot of documents and conduct many interviews. And when I got to the bottom of things, I found out that the lion's share of that $3 million had actually come from state aid that should have been earmarked under its own name, which was local property tax relief dollars. So every year, while that property tax levy went up and up and up, that state aid that was supposed to act as property tax relief was put into a slush account for a fancy new office building. And when I got to the bottom of that issue, the county had a consultant auditor come in, dismantle its entire finance department and rebuild it from the ground up on the promise that this will never happen again. And I tell that story because I think that what we will find when we truly have laws that allow for this transparency for folks and organizations like newspapers and journalists to look at these documents and access them, that we will save taxpayer dollars. I think that your conversation thus far has been really productive. You have a lot of great ideas. There are a lot of recipes out there that can provide both relief in terms of setting fees, making sure that documents are accessible when they're requested, when requests are reasonable, but also to have a relief valve in there when we do have, data miners coming in and asking for, gigantic amounts of data. I think I'd strongly second Bob's idea about penciling in something about the public good request, that those should be free to access. It would be wonderful if in these gray areas where maybe there is something that's requested that's considered the public good but is very voluminous or time consuming, that the ombudsman could make a determination to either extend the length of time that a local government has to fulfill that request or provide for some fees to be recouped in those events. So I really appreciate your work here today, and I'd certainly welcome any questions you have. And thank you so much for taking this topic up.
Thank you. Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is not really a question, but it's kind of a tangent issue that's been either directly or indirectly addressed by the last two speakers. I think in us looking at legislation, we should look at concepts of incentivizing the broader release and availability of public information. Because I do think, having dug into property tax data at these local levels, you'll find a very drastic variation of what's available and what's not available. So I do understand that, but just from an incentive perspective, something for this body to consider, and I just wanted to throw that out. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Bonner, I did want to know on that email, 55 pages, if I do print that out, is it $10 for the first page and $1 per page after?
It depends on which office you go to print it at, Mr. Chairman.
All right, well, let's go to online. We have a couple people that wish to, is there anybody else in the room, by the way, that wishes to speak on this? Okay, so let's start with that. Go ahead and we'll fill the seats up here and take care of in-house first, and then we'll jump to online.
There you go.
How are you? Good to see you.
Good.
Yeah,
thank
we'll
you.
go ahead and start from my left to you, to the right, so.
All right, Mr. Chairman, committee, my name is Sarah Penn, Fort Washakie. This topic is near and dear to my heart, and I appreciate the work that you are doing. You're doing great work. If I'd been able to speak prior to lunch, I would have touched on several of the issues that you have arrived at yourselves. I support Representative Ottman's comments on standardization. I think that that's important. When we see investigations across the state where one entity charges nothing and another entity charges $45 or $60, or one school board charges $900 and another one charges $1,800 for the same request of information, we need to ensure that we are examining some way to make sure that there's a standardization. I appreciate Senator Boner's thoughts on the recovery of the fees. I was going to touch on that. I think that's important. If people are going to be able to appeal these and incur the expense that it requires going through the legal process, then that needs to be that is an important component. One thing that I don't think that we have touched on yet that I wanted to bring out is the thought of who is asking or who is retrieving the information. When a request has been made, then who is it up to glean and gain that information that we then send back to the citizens? Right now, I know that locally here, it often is up to the people who are being FOIA'd, the people whose request that affects. And so in effort to obtain transparency, I think that it's important that we question how that process is. If I'm being asked to submit emails or correspondence that might contain incriminating evidence for me, and I understand that there's no one else that's going to come back and check for that information, it's going to be pretty simple for me to hold back some things that may be pertinent to protect myself, that is interesting to the person who's asking for that information. And so in today's technology, this world that we live in, it shouldn't be difficult for a entity or a representative who is not connected to the situation, who's the one who is reviewing that information or requesting those emails or just pulling those emails. Those things they should just come out, maybe without even my knowledge, if I'm the one that's being having that information requested of. And so that's something that I wanted to bring up. Also, earlier Representative Webb had brought up his own experience with spending days trying to come up with information, and then nothing. The individual either doesn't want to pay for it or just decides not to show up. And so I guess you could call this FOIA fair against our local entities, and we want to prevent that as well. And so one thought I had, and you can entertain your own ideas, but say a assessment is this amount of information is going to cost $500. There could potentially be a deposit made. You can say, okay, this is what it's going to cost you. It's going to cost $500. And I think that an itemized list is important. If the individual requesting the information feels like that's an acceptable amount to them and they're willing to go ahead with that, then they need to come in and they need to put 10% down or 15, or whatever you decide would be appropriate. But that way there's skin in the game on both sides, and hopefully that could help prevent some of that FOIA fare within our agencies. We've elected these people to do their job, and we want to make sure that they can do the job that they have been elected to do. And it isn't right if somebody's simply trying to kind of hamstring and grind things to a halt by making these requests. Yeah, I think that's all I had to say. We had a lot of great things. And so I'm just really interested in this topic. It's very near and dear to my heart. We need to make sure that people have access to those who they have elected, and who we need to make sure that they can understand the goings on behind the scenes. Thank you. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. I think we'll go through testimony, and then if we have any questions for any of the three at the end, we'll go ahead. Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Patrick Collins from Cheyenne. First of all, I just want to say your ombudsman, it's hard for me to say. My staff says that that's been a great addition. When you have questions, you have somebody that you can reach out and talk to. And so thank you for that. We purchased a software application to try to help us manage these, because they're really tough. We request that people make those applications on that software, and then we don't lose them, doesn't fall through the cracks. We can keep track of the timelines and things. So we're working, trying to use technology as best we can to do that. One of the comments that was made by a previous speaker was it's our job as local governments to hold those records and to deliver them. And I could not agree more. I feel very strongly that that's our job, that these are public records. We're the custodians of those. We need to keep them. My question is for who, though? And a challenge that, and the reason I stayed here today is my clerk is sharing with me the data mining challenges that she's facing. And she gave me 6 examples. I'd like to share just a couple of those with you. This OHM Analytics every month sends us a request for every building permit on solar. And they give us like 15 items. They want the permit, the number, the name of the everything on those permits. We get that every month. The construction monitor, every month we get requests for every building permit that's been given in Cheyenne for both residential and commercial properties. And again, there's a list of about 12 or 15 things that they want us to do. And they're even asking us to put it in a form so it makes it easy for them to use. Innovo AI Solutions sent us recently a request for every purchasing record from July 1st of 2020 to today. They wanted the ID number of the vendor's name, the PO number, the invoice, the check number, the purchase date. They want a description of every line item, the line item quantity, the line item price. Since 2020, every purchase, you guys can imagine, you guys are the state, you understand how much you do. You know, we have a budget. We're probably going to spend $300 million in a year between all of our 5th penny, 6th penny sales tax projects, all the things that we do. That's a lot to ask for. The Boomerang Asset Recovery wants every month a list of all our uncashed checks and warrants more than 6 months old, because they're going to send a letter to those folks and saying, for $100, I'm going to help you recover some money from the city of Cheyenne. And so it's an unclaimed property thing. National Analytics, they want every purchase order valued every month from us for $5,000 or greater. And again, a laundry list of all the different items that they want. And then Smart Procure, same thing from MPO. They want all of our purchasing records they just asked for from 1/1 of 2019. That's a lot, you guys. It's a lot. I got a request from one of the media, and they asked for every email and every record we have for the Meta project. Now, we worked on that Meta project for 6 years. And when we looked, it was going to be thousands, maybe tens of thousands of pages of stuff. And so we called them and told them, hey, we're happy to do that, but it's going to cost you some money because it's going to take us months to be able to do that. Because with Meta, we have some proprietary information that they had to share with us in order to be able to get their building permits. And finally, I just thought about it. So I'm just going to call the reporter and ask him what he wants. Well, he heard me say that we didn't know who the company was. And he wanted to know, well, how in the heck did we work on this project for 6 or 7 years if we didn't know who the company was? And I thought that was a really good question. But we give him a code name. That was code name Cosmo. And so everything we did, we used a code name. So I didn't know who the company was, but I knew everything about that business except for their name. And when I told him that, he goes, well, that's all I wanted. But he asked us for 6 years of information to get one item is how did we do that? And so I find if we make those phone calls, we can help. But my ask of you guys would be, I understand our responsibility when it comes to public record requests. And I think it's our obligation to do that and to make sure it happens. But my question is, who are we doing that for? If some company in New York wants to get this information so they can use it to sell products, and it's going to take my clerk 2 or 3 hours a month to do that information, is that fair? And I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barron?
Thank you, Chairman Knapp. I appear here, my name is Joe Barron, Crook County and prosecuting attorney, and I just wanted to answer a couple things or clarify them. One of the things that was raised here was that the county attorney and his duties as it relates to county officers. We have a statute, we're statutory, the legislature's passed this, that act in all courts of the states as legal counsel for the county or counties and its officers acting in their official capacity and prosecutor defend all suits instituted by or against his counties, or its officers. That's our charge. That's our duty. That's what we do. That said, when it comes to, any of that as a public official, taxpayer, citizen, and what the job is there is tell people when one of these public records requests come about, it's okay, what do they want? And the best thing to do is call them up and ask them. Because most of the time that it can be resolved on the website or it's already there, something like that. I just looked at ours because there's this outcry about the dues. And on our website, real simple, go to the county budget, you look at it, you look under county commissioners, dues. They pay, what is it? $9,805. Okay. And so it's real easy for people to look for this stuff and find it. The problem is it doesn't fall into their outstretched hand. And that's part of the thing that you get right here. With the data miners, that what we get is not only they want all of that information, then we have information that we get with that has their employer ID numbers, things like that, so that we can do tax receipts on vendors and people that we do business with and all that. And so the point of that is then you got to redact a bunch of the privacy issues on that. And it's a lot of work. So if the legislature says the priority is not to issue titles, but to answer public records requests, it's what's going to happen is when you show up to get your title, they're going to close the window because they're doing too many public records requests on this type of stuff. So that elected official has to prioritize what's going on in that particular office on what they're going to do on any given day. And all of this in county government, in any government for that matter, it's a juggling act. What do you do? What's a crisis? What are you dealing with today? How do you manage all of these requests? And it's from citizens, and it's somebody calling about, anything. And a lot of times we have to look at that and send folks to the right people to talk to see what's going on. And so I think that's the real issue here to me is what's a priority? Is the priority for elected officials to do the job they already have statutes to do? And how do they balance that with providing information? Most of this information is available if the folks just show up and go look. If they want to go look at the vouchers, they're there. All they have to do is pull the file cabinet drawer open and they can type in all that stuff and fill out the form. They can come to the office and do that, just like the citizens of the county can. The people that are sitting all over the country that want this information, they want it. They want you to do that. And so when you pass something and you're going to charge fees and things like that, you need to look at who's requesting it, why are they requesting it, and is it going to the constituents in this particular county and state that need that information. So that's something that I see. The fees, because there's a request right now going around for fee schedules around the state. What does each county have? Well, counties are a little bit different because we have a county and county commissioners, but they don't run my office. They don't set the fees in my office. Each elected official has their own statutory and legal obligation to be able to do that. And it depends on what's it going to take if they measure it to see how they do it. But I'd be surprised. We have a couple that have fees because they've always had fees, and that was the sheriff's office and the clerk's office. There's statutory fees there. But a lot of the other offices, it's on a per copy basis if it doesn't take a lot. But if they want a lot of data, it varies. And I'm sure it varies across the state. I'm sure there's no uniformity. That doesn't surprise me at all, which I don't know if the state, we looked at the state thing that they did, their rules and regs. And I think that's helpful. It's pretty helpful guidance on that with having something from the state to do that.
Thank you, County Attorney Barron. Just a comment, I think the more that we look at standardizing and formalizing the process and looking at public interest, I think a lot of those questions will be solved. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I have two questions, one for Mr. Barron and one for Mr. Collins. For Mr. Barron, if one of your clients, one of the elected public officials is being sued or violates the law, how's that handled? Do you have a Chinese wall in your office and some attorneys prosecute and some attorneys defend, or how do you happen, or do you get a neighboring county to provide counsel on one side or the other? How does that happen in their official capacity if they're being sued?
County Attorney Barron?
Okay, Chairman Knapp, Chairman Case. Having gone through that, there's a couple different things in there. One is in a civil capacity and one is in a criminal capacity.
Either
If an
way, yeah.
Individual in a criminal capacity, having gone through this recently, that I don't prosecute that person that I'm charged with and have been charged with representing for years on that. I find a special prosecutor to do that. In this state, there is no central special prosecutor thing. So the way we do that as county attorneys and district attorneys is we try to find somebody else that's willing to do it.
Yeah, I know.
And we swap with that. In my situation, I was able initially to get the Attorney General's office to do that the first time. And the second time we went around, the same situation, we had to get a private attorney, or the Campbell County Attorney's Office to do that. So we do that, and we do that for each other. One, frankly, because we know that if we go hire outside counsel, it costs money. And we're all, we are all cognizant of the fact, because we're all elected to office, we're all of what it costs to do things and to save the taxpayers money. And the problem is that with that is this, as times have changed and people get more work with things, then what's happened is that the ability to find somebody to special prosecute is less and less each year. That's been my experience.
Fair enough.
Now, with the civil side of things, with regard to that, and I have not had that event take place where maybe in an assessment issue, and we got an assessment case and I represent the county assessor, but I'm thinking somebody gets sued on something like a public records request or something. To me, I would look at that, and looking at the penalty section that's set forth in there, I don't think that's a civil penalty on that. Any person who intentionally violates the provision of this act is liable in penalty. The penalty may be recovered in a civil action and damages may be assessed by the court. I don't believe that I represent that individual in that capacity. That is a private civil matter that any private individual, in all these cases that we heard about, the 50 people, but no fine was imposed, or it's not a fine, it's a penalty is imposed because nobody ever took it to court. They never pushed the issue. I understand it costs money to do that, but it's also these statutes here, they used to be criminal in nature and nothing was done at that time either. There's very rare that it was happened because of this wording of some of the statutes like that. Now, and I was there when we did this in the 219 and even in 212, that to make those changes on those statutes with the hope with the civil penalty was that private individuals didn't have to rely upon the state attorney general or the county attorney or anybody like that to do it. They could go do it themselves. And apparently, under what we have right now, that has not worked, other than the fact that we don't know that it's worked or not, but he said that they had 50 cases where there were violations. And that's their opinion, I'm sure. And so there's another side to that, but it was never litigated. So we don't know the answer to that.
Can I do a follow-up on this?
Chairman Case.
If we give the ombudsman the power to impose civil penalties and they impose it on the Johnson County Commission, just as an example, would you enforce that? Would you go to court to collect that? Or would you say, no, that I'm not, that's not my job?
It's not my job.
Mr. Barron?
Excuse me, Chairman. I'm sorry. Chairman Knapp, Chairman Case. that's a private civil matter. That individual would have to go to that court to seek enforcement of that judgment against that particular individual that violated the law.
And so, Mr. Chairman, that individual being the ombudsman would have to go to Johnson County, seek representation, and go to that court? Is that what you're saying?
Mr. Barron?
Chairman Knapp, Chairman Case, I think, as I understand it, so if you gave the authority to
The
the
ombudsman.
ombudsman to enforce things,
Mhm.
okay? So then, I would think the simplest and easiest thing to do on that and avoid the conflicts of interest would be to either one, assign them their own attorney or assign somebody out of the Attorney General's office to do that. And they're in the same boat as everybody else. They have limited staff and time
Sure.
and manpower to do everything. But yeah, I think that way you avoid the conflicts because then we're involved probably on some advice with that particular elected official
Fair enough.
on that.
Follow
Still have a question for Mayor
up? Oh,
Collins.
yep.
And Mayor Collins, you recall when we have our current state auditor, Christy Racinas, and you all recall when she was running for that office, and the previous auditor had said that there wasn't possible to provide information about the transactions that the state of Wyoming was to put the Wyoming state transactions online. And it seemed really difficult, and there were lots of estimates that it cost a lot of money. But then when Auditor Racinas was elected, she accomplished that task in a very amazing amount of time. And it was just an amazing system where you could search for a voucher number or a check number online. And it's a really good system. All the things you listed, Mr. Mayor, seemed to me that whether it was a building permit, why shouldn't a building permit be online? Why shouldn't a request for variance be online? I can't remember all the things you said, but I'm thinking, why wouldn't government want all that online for their citizens? And if it was already online, you wouldn't have to do a records request because everybody should be able to get that information. Could you comment on that? I mean, and it was State Auditor Racinas. That was an amazing transformation that didn't cost very much. It was more of a change in attitude than anything. Excuse me. You got me choked up.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Chairman, to the chairman, sir, I agree. We are working very hard on trying to provide more and more of that information online for exactly that reason, to make it easier so we don't have to spend as much time. So, every one of our agendas, every one of our meetings, we have a recording of that, a video recording, just like what you guys are doing here. I think some of those are great items that came out of the COVID was when we started having to do meetings online. We've continued to do those. We record those. And as soon as the meeting's over, they're online with the agendas, all the backup information on every one of those, the items on our agenda are there. And we're back maybe 4 years now, I would guess, that we have all of that information now on our website. And we will continue to, as we find time, to continue to add more and more information to that, because you're exactly right. That's how we should be doing it.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, even every transaction, every warrant, or I don't know if you use checks or warrants, but everything.
Mr. Chairman, I agree. We're going to get there, sir, eventually. We're making progress every day.
Other questions? Thank you very much. All right. Is there anybody else here to testify on this issue? Okay, let's go to online. See who we have. Mr. Miller, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead and introduce yourself and we'll hear your comments.
Very good. Thank you, Chairman. I am Victor Miller. I'm a citizen of Cheyenne. And just a public records advocate. I would say before I knew about the public records laws and, I believed in them, but truly once you experience kind of the lawlessness, the best records advocate is one who has experienced that, let's say. And I really commend the ombudsman for trying to portray the landscape that's out there as far as the disregard for the law. And as far as that goes, it's really kind of disheartening. I think what you have is a real law and order question too. I mean, it doesn't matter why these people want what they want. If it's in the statutes, it should be done. And when it's not, it's a breakdown of the law, and that should be thought about too. And I do sympathize with the public servants, and they have a job that they're being paid for. And perhaps one thing that I could bring to this discussion is I watched the entire recent show cause hearing that the Department of Education went through. That was a year-long event, and it really was a dissection of public records request and a minute examination of the anatomy of what happens. And at one point, the judge kind of took over and kind of put himself in the shoes of the requester and said, this hearing's not going on any longer until I believe that the initial request has been fulfilled. And even then, they came back and they said, all right, now it's filled. And then they found another one. And so you kind of have this thing of where you're working through someone else. And it's almost like, like maybe one of those gags where you tell someone else instructions and they kind of mess it up because it gets lost in translation or whatever. And so anyway, so even the judge taking over the records request, they still failed to do it. And that's a state department, not a local one. And that's how they ended up getting the fine. So this has been litigated and the fine has been assessed. They talked about this in the case, whether it would be the agency paying the fine or the individual. So there is case law on it now that it is the individual. Both the public records ombudsman for the Department of Education and the director of that agency were fined the maximum $750 and paid that personally. But to put that into scope, that is after a years long trial. I think it went on for about 3 years and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars on both sides when you add it up. The state did represent the persons of in that civil suit on that side. So the state, I think, spent 750 hours on that case through the Attorney General's office. And so that's kind of some background there. I hope that helps you. And so I guess I like to see the technology part too. And, in this day and age where it's going to be pretty archaic to have something that's not online anyway, that it seems like a win-win, both for the requester and for the public entities, if all of this is online. And so then I hope to see that by definition, a public document is what is on this portal, say, and everything that's not on there publicly accessible is using some kind of carve out to be shielded from that. And so that's kind of how I envision the future going, and I hope that is the case. And I would like to see the state providing a shining example of that, because we already, if you take a look at the ombudsman cases, a lot of them are for emails. Maybe over half. I looked through a year's worth of them once, and maybe over half of them were for emails. And the state of Wyoming contracts with Google to run their email. And it would be such a simple thing to have a portal exist to where people could examine those public emails on their own time, and no public servant would even have to worry about it at all. And not only that, but as a researcher, it's hard to do research through a second person, you know, as that judge found out. You kind of need to be in there holistically and to figure out what's going on yourself in order to get the information you need. And I guess that's all I got for now. Thanks a lot, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Any questions from the committee? All right, thank you. And who do we have next?
Yes. Hey, Mr. Chairman, it's Mark Kep.
Mr. Kep, hello.
Hey, thank you. I'm going to rename your guys' committee to the Ironmen and Women Committee because you just go and go and go. So it's impressive. I'm actually coming from you up in the mountains.
It's nice to see you go throughout your day here.
Yeah, we're out looking for my son's first turkey right now. So we're up here in the Black Hills of Wyoming. I wanted to comment on this real fast, if it's okay. In regard to the public request, I actually went through this recently following some of your committee meetings. There was some commentary from the county clerks that I thought was interesting, and I wanted to get information on it. And as a member of the public, I was not aware of the proper process. And so my initial path was to send an email to the clerks just asking the questions that I was asking, and I didn't get a response. And so about a month later, I ended up finding out, oh, there's a process and there's a person. And so I submitted that, and it went to 3 different counties. It was Converse, Carbon, and Fremont. Converse County, they replied within the 30 days. Some things they could reply to, some things they couldn't. That was fine, but they replied. I mentioned yesterday in testimony that both Fremont and Carbon had not. Since that testimony, Fremont actually replied last night and sent over the information. And Carbon County replied that they actually had sent my email to spam, and they just thought it was spam and just deleted it. So I want to Senator Case commented about his ideas. I agree with those. Those are actually very good ideas. I like the suggestions a lot. One thing I would like you to add into your thought process here is the advances in AI and the ability of AI to parse data. It's a topic that you may want to include in your legislation because it's coming fast, and those tools are going to allow people to be a lot more powerful and accessible to the data, which means there's going to be potentially problems with how that data is being parsed and taken and so forth. So I don't have an answer for you on that. I just want to throw it out there as something else to add into your conversation in regard to the regulations you're updating right now, because it's here already, and it's definitely going to become more powerful as the years go on. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kep. Any questions from the committee? All right, good luck on your hunt.
Thanks, sir. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Thank you. In here too. All right, is Ms. Herman on?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. My camera is not working.
That's okay. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'll be very brief. Marguerite Herman from Laramie County. Typically, I speak for the League of Women Voters. This is going to be sort of on my own. You've heard plenty about fees, how much, who levies them, against whom, and attorneys' fees. And sort of, I'm going to reference just real briefly topics that Vic Miller brought up, that case that was against the State Department of Education, and the a former superintendent just brought up issues as he mentioned. But the things that haven't been mentioned so far today are searches that are conducted, and this involved searches of financial records and communications, text messages and emails, etc. And so there was a big part of it was how the quality of the search. And so when you update this legislation, if you could include what constitutes a diligent search, what constitutes that the person has done a job, because as it turns out, the search terms were completely inadequate. They came out in court and had to go back and redo it. for whatever reason, without describing motivation, when the proper search terms were used, that it produced a whole lot more relevant documents. So if you could just describe what a good search does, and then sort of related to that was a search that was sort of cured, it was fixed, and then it was considered not part of the original request. It became then an additional request in the eyes of the agency. And how is that going to be handled? And I don't know, it seems like sort of it would be logical to say, no, you are just fixing the original inadequate search. So if you have to go back and update or find documents that were there all the time, is that a new search? Is that a new request? And that would have to do with the fees. And like Mr. Miller said, there were two parties that personally were fined $750, which went to the local school district, as those kinds of fines do. But anyway, and as Mr. Miller said, if you want to read the opinion in that, it was in Laramie County District Court, and District Judge Sharp wrote that final. And he has other tips that may be helpful to LSO as you update the public records law. And that's all I have. Just if you could address what is the bar, what is the requirement below which it's not satisfactory of the document search. And that will stand for questions.
All right, no questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much for testifying.
Thank you.
Katie, do we have anybody else? No one else. All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative Yoon.
Mr. Chairman, so Sandy Ress, who is from my neck of the woods, not my district, but the county, Teton County, sent in, he wanted to testify, but he sent in some testimony and wanted to tell the committee that in his testimony, he really wanted the highlighted portions to be something that the committee looks at. So you all have it in your email. Basically, to give some context around Mr. Ress's testimony, he had a conflict where he disagreed with the conduct of the hospital board, the public hospital board, and that ended up going to court, and basically believes that there needed to be changes to the Public Records Act based on both the conduct of the hospital board and the outcome of the litigation, and basically how the response happened with that entity. I would just ask all of the committee members to take a look. I think he is one of the reasons that we even have this as a topic before us in the committee.
All right. Thank you, Representative Yin. All right. Any other, Mr. Chairman?
Well, just by way of figuring out how to proceed, we haven't talked about open meetings much, and I don't know I think we're out of gas to take on the open meetings part. Maybe we could do more of that at the next meeting. But I would go back to the proposal that we asked for a draft that has lots of pieces and parts that we can add or subtract or whatever, but that some of the pieces would be a timeline where an entity has to acknowledge the request within 3 days, provide the request within 10 days, or longer with the acquiescence of the ombudsman, which could be a standard of 30 days or something. That would be the max. And these are just ideas that we apply. We maintain the ability of the ombudsman to waive fees in the public interest entirely, but that we in general apply the fee schedule that A&I has made by rulemaking for state agencies. But we allow entities to charge higher fees, again with the permission of the ombudsman. That the bill also contained the ability for the ombudsman to levy the civil penalty. And I don't know quite how to make that happen, but if we were to say that she should enjoy counsel from the Attorney General's office in that, and Josh, I'm probably not saying that correctly, but that she would be able to draw on the Attorney General's office for counsel to make that happen.
And I don't know if we want to put it in this bill or a separate bill, but the idea of the elected associations, where elected officials have associations they belong to, that those associations would be subject to the records request. And I don't know if that's a separate bill or not. I'd listen to counsel on that. But that would be kind of what I've got. And we could add other things in there and then just get a draft that we can look at.
I would agree. That would be a referral to the Attorney General's office, probably.
Yeah, I think.
Similar to what any other,
Well,
elected
she's
would do.
essentially suing, right? And so she has to have a lawyer to sue. And so I think should come from the Attorney General's office, because I don't think you're going to get the local prosecutor to do it.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I appreciate Chairman Case's thoughts on that. Regarding modeling after the A&I rulemaking that established a list of charges, I wonder if we couldn't, I'm looking over at staff on this one, maybe look at a way to craft that language so that we wouldn't have to go in and change that figure every 1 or 2 years in legislation. And just say that whatever A&I has established at whatever level, the local entities would follow that or something. I'd be curious if there's a way that we could do that. Yeah. So that way we don't have to go back in.
Thank you.
I'm a little less warmed up on the idea of capturing associations and going that direction. Not sure about that one, but
I'm not either, actually.
Throw
Mr.
it.
Chairman, I'm not entirely sure about that one either because of pitfalls. It's hard to say, well, I mean, really, like the open meetings law applies in the situations where they try to defeat a quorum or where there's a quorum. That has to be a public open thing. I don't understand what a quorum is in an association made up of elected officials. They have no quorum standing. They don't implement the law. So I'm not sure of this. I'm just saying we could see the words on paper and we could react to it.
Senator Landon.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I don't blame a newspaper guy for suggesting that we want to know as much as we can about everything and everybody and every association, but I'm just not sure that we want to go that far. We can certainly have that conversation.
Let's just divide it. Let's just put the association issue as a separate issue. And all we would be looking for, maybe the other members have other things they'd like to add. And then we could just vote on the concept.
Any other comments from the committee?
Yeah.
Senator Bonner.
Sorry if I missed this, but with the penalty portion, make the reimbursement for the attorney's fees, can we add that in there?
I say yes. I'm okay with that. And also that the fee have a range, more than just the flat 750. And I'll just throw out upper range of 2,000 for right now.
So conceptually, is the committee okay with moving that forward with these different options that we can look at for the next meeting?
Do we think we have the options, Josh? Okay. That would be just a voice vote and then we could deal with another thing.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, no. All right, motion carries.
And just for everybody online, that's just to have the bill drafted. Doesn't mean we're going to support it. We're going to let everybody look at it and we'll discuss it at the next meeting. We'll get it out in time enough that everybody can see it. Now, the idea of the associations, just to discuss that separately, I think the idea is that associations made up of elected officials should be subject to the, I assume, the Open Meetings Act and the Open Records Act. Senator Representative Lucas.
Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Case, just a follow-up on what you said. These associations, I believe, are 501c4s and they are tax exempt, C6. I looked up one of them and one of them was a 4, but so they may not all be though, but they're tax exempt and as such are required to give up to 3 years of financials upon request. Now, there's no requirement, of course, for them to have that on their website, which I think would be lovely, only because then nobody would ask. If they could just go get it, they would never ask. But so I think some of them may not be aware of that because they do refuse, not all of them, but I have heard of it happening where a records request is not granted. They don't give out their financials. They say, go to the IRS and get it.
Well, I think we've got the marching orders and that will be a policy issue we can look at then separately, so.
Mr. Chairman, that may bring about the constitutional question that everybody's talked about. That may just lay it out there and staff may say constitutionally, this is protected by the First Amendment and the Wyoming Constitution as well. It certainly could, and let's hear that argument.
All right, we're going to move on. So we are up to Uniform Commercial Code.
Must be 115.
Yeah.
Here comes an attorney.
I've been pretty excited about this one, Mr. Chairman.
All right, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Case, members of the committee, Scott Meyer on behalf of the Uniform Laws Commission. I don't know if we can get on there. I don't know if my co-commissioner Allison Gee is online, but I'd like to have her on with me because we were together on some of this.
We'll let her in.
While she's coming in, Mr. Chairman, I'd point out that Mr. Meyer also ate lunch in this room and we had chocolate milk on Fridays in the good old days and we had band practice also in this room.
That's correct.
And we were the trumpet section.
Tell us about detention.
We know.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, since he's here to talk about uniforms, I just wondered what your feeling was about Shadur Sanders not getting his number with the Cleveland Browns. Is that what we're here to talk about, or?
Attorney-client privilege, Mr. Senator Landon. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Scott Meyer and I'm with the Uniform Laws Commission. Usually Wyoming has 3 commissioners. Right now we have 4 and we're very pleased to have Justice Couch, who has retired, become a member emeritus. And so he'll be on this for a while. Along with me, then I have Allison Gee, who is on the screen with you. And then we also have Judge Buchanan out of Goshen County. The 4 of us are the commission from Wyoming. Now, some states have more than one. Wyoming has 3 commissioners now, plus 1. And we deal with the uniform laws, trying to make things easier between the states. I don't know where you want me to go with this. I know that we were invited to do that. I can give you an update of what the Uniform Laws Commission does, but we did attach a document for you to look at. We are nonpartisan. We are a group of people that will get together, law professors, judges, attorneys, people that work with this stuff to try to make what we have is a uniform laws amongst all the states. What the commission does is that we look at these laws. We look at drafts of these laws. We look at laws that are proposed by commissioners, by legislators, by scholarly people, what have you, that we look at. And then we have different committees that we are on that we look at the different aspects of those proposed laws and see where they are. Just because a law is proposed doesn't mean that the Uniform Laws Commission will adopt it. A uniform law, for example, on parental rights, maybe that sounds good, but maybe what Oregon is proposing is not the same as what Wyoming would propose. And so there are definitely some areas that we believe that Wyoming has its own skin in the game. It has its own priorities of what we're doing. And so those laws are not always adopted. But Wyoming has adopted a few of those. I think that in the document that was prepared for you folks, obviously we have the Uniform Commercial Code, and that has been amended over the years. The Uniform Securities Act, the Uniform Trust Code, with modifications. I'll say some of those we have Wyoming home cooking in. The Wyoming Electronic Transactions Act, the Wyoming Foreign Probate Act, the Wyoming Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act, the Wyoming Power of Attorney Act with modifications, and the Wyoming Notary Act with modifications that has Wyoming home cooking. We represent Wyoming in those. We represent the state and try to say what is good for Wyoming. And then we have the debates with them at the Uniform Laws Commission. If in fact there's a law that comes out, one which I would propose today at some point in time, then we will look at that. Then if the commission or the Uniform Laws Commission adopts it, then those commissioners will take that back to their states. And that doesn't even mean that guarantee that the states are going to agree with it. So, you know, Utah may say yes on something, Wyoming says, no, we don't want that here. The one that is pretty universal is probably the Uniform Commercial Code because every state has adopted it. And there are very few changes on that because of commerce. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions on that. And I'd like to at least turn it over to my partner in crime, Allison Gee, and see if she has anything she wants to add.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Oh,
Go ahead.
You were going to say something.
I was just
Well,
waiting.
I was just going to do a little bit more stage setting too. I think the reason this topic is on our agenda is that we had a bill brought in the Senate and it was Senate File 189, Uniform Commercial Code Investment Securities Amendments, which was a carve out from the Uniform Commercial Code and with respect to certain investments. And it failed in the Senate, but it was actually brought by our president. And there are very strong feelings about this issue. It involves Bitcoins and cryptocurrency and how that is treated. And it was brought by people that feel that treatment under the Uniform Commercial Code was burdensome perhaps. And so, I mean, it was quite a deviation. And we thought, wow, before we deviate from something that's a uniform act, we ought to hear why we have uniform acts in commerce, what the Uniform Law Commission does, and just kind of get an impression of that. So this is just educational. There's not a bill that's going to come out of this or anything, but we want to understand the importance of the Uniform Law Commission.
Ms. Gee, welcome. Do you have comments that you'd like to make?
Hi, thank you, chairmen and committee. I appreciate the time to be here. I'm Allison Gee. I'm an attorney out of Gillette, and I've been on the Uniform Law Commission about a year now. It's a 3-year term by appointment. And I am appointed to a study committee. So bills that are considered by the commission go through a study period of usually a couple years, and then they go into a drafting committee. And those are drafted over a couple years in many cases, and then come before the entire body to be approved. So many of these proposed laws have been heavily vetted. There are lots of interested parties who are non-commissioners who are invited to participate and listen and comment, much like this setting, throughout that process. So there's a lot of input that goes into these proposed laws. I am a strong supporter of state rights and independence of states in creating laws for its citizens. And that is part of what interested me in serving on the Uniform Law Commission, is the ability to bring good laws to Wyoming that fit our culture and our people, but have been well thought out through this process. And I'm happy to discuss, concerns about the Uniform Commercial Code and changes, but I guess what I would ask of this committee is, because the Uniform Law Commission exists and we exist to help serve this body, that in the future, if there are uniform laws that are being considered for, we're not notified, we discovered it on the agenda for the legislative session, and that we be given an opportunity to try and bring resources to the table to be considered, at least in that process. So thank you so much for this time and for allowing us to represent Wyoming in this capacity.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for coming. And this is, and I want to thank the co-chairman for bringing up this important topic, because I will say that SF 189, there's a growing body of people with concern as it relates to this particular UCC code, and I wanted to make sure that the commission is at least aware of that fact. So we would be very interested in what the issues and concerns are. These are changes that happened in the uniform commercial code back in the early to mid 70s or 90s. I'm sorry. And ultimately, I think that when it got passed, I think there was a misunderstanding. The public certainly did not understand the impacts to the public. And so it is certainly a growing issue. And I wanted you at least to be aware of that, and a concern at least of this member of this committee, but certainly other people who are concerned. Thank you.
Ms. Key, do you have a
Mr.
comment to
Chairman?
that?
Yeah, thank you. The Uniform Law Commission has offered to bring experts in this area to legislative meeting or committee meeting to the extent that would be helpful. And I think it would be really helpful. These issues are very complicated. And my concern is, as we tinker with these laws, it's important to understand the impacts on commerce across state lines, and especially how it would affect our partners who handle our brokerage accounts, for example. So we're happy to bring resources to the table to try and help with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I wonder if we could take them up on that offer and actually solicit their concerns about House Bill 189 and maybe provide more background document about it. And we should let the sponsors also provide us with some information about it. Maybe we could get that in writing first, and then we could kind of decide if we want to make it an agenda item for next time. And yeah, did I say House bills? I'm sorry. I never get the Houses and Senates right. We're all one. We're all brothers and sisters. Senate File 189. And, we could certainly get comments from you on that legislation, the Uniform Law Commission. I did hear from Judge Couts, and but let's also give the sponsors and proponents a chance to talk too. And I've gotten a few emails on it as well. We could do it in writing and not take up committee time unless it looks like it should be a committee item agenda. Well, and that would be up to the committee maybe. Let's look at the written materials first, kind of what people have to say, and then we could decide if to put it on the next agenda. Could that work? Something like that? I'm looking to our witnesses.
Mr. Chairman and
Mr. Mayor.
co-chairman, I would tell you that I think that would work very well. Just to clarify, one of maybe the misunderstanding here is that the proposed changes to Article 8 that were proposed this last session dealt with securities intermediaries, and it did not have anything to do with cryptocurrency or stable tokens or anything else. It was just the securities intermediary and the private property rights.
Okay,
So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I definitely stand corrected, but it had some connection with that, didn't it, or not? Not at all.
no, Mr. Chairman.
I stand like this tall right here. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Other than that, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Co-Chairman, I do have a proposed bill that I'd like to pass out that you would look at, that maybe we could look at at any time during the interim. This is one of those bills, and I think, as Ms. Gee pointed out, she's on a review committee. I have, and this may find really surprising to you, but I'm on the commercial financial disclosures group. So, and also with cryptocurrency and everything, probably because of the relationship with the banking. But we have a Uniform Mortgage Modification Act that we would definitely like the committee to look at. I know that other states around us have adopted it, but I thought if I passed it out, that possibly one of the other interim committees, I'd be happy to go through and talk to you, but at least give you something to look at.
I would think because we have this as a topic for the interim, we would entertain that.
And Mr. Chairman, maybe we could get in the nutshell what this bill does.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, in a nutshell, what this bill does is it allows and codifies, even though there's different states have different rules on some things, that it codifies what happens when you make a modification to a mortgage. And if you've seen the interest rates that have adjusted over the last 4 or 5 years, they go up, they go down. There's a concern about people wanting to deal with their lenders to say, geez, I may not make a payment, but maybe we can extend the payments. Maybe we can change the interest rates. You can modify the mortgage. The question then and what happens with that is how do you make sure you have priority? Sometimes senior lenders say, we could do this, but I want the consent from the junior lien holders. Sometimes if you could just make simple modifications, what you have to do is make sure that you protect that priority interest, but you don't want to harm those who are in second or third position because they're counting on this as well. And that's what essentially what this law does is codify when you can and when you can't and how we protect those interests.
Interesting. Mr. Chairman, I would say, let's look at it.
I would agree with that. Everybody okay? All right. That sounds good.
Yeah, I'll pass it out here momentarily if there's any other questions.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone
Thank
else in
you.
the room on this particular topic? Thank you, Allison. Okay, anybody else online? All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
can we circle back to the constitutional enforcement subcommittee?
Oh, yes.
And I'm not saying it has to be appointed today, but if there were people that wanted to volunteer for that, and the thinking is the people that are most upset about the way we apportion the legislature, as I see it, fall in eastern Wyoming and in the Bighorn Basin. So I would propose like a deal where we have 2 meetings in eastern Wyoming, 2 hearings, and 1 in the basin, perhaps. And the membership, I don't care if it's 4 members or 6, I would say that depends on how many members would like to serve. You would get pay and per diem for serving and travel. And we'd have 3 meetings, 2 in eastern Wyoming, 1 in Bighorn Basin. I don't think we would do Zoom as an option. The reason is I think we need to go there and face the music and hear what these people have to say. And I would hope it would be available on Zoom, of course, but I would hope that the members would appear in person because I just think it's that kind of meeting where you got to go. And so I would volunteer to serve on it, and perhaps you would, sir. It's okay if not, but I'm looking for volunteers, and I think we have to kind of have perhaps 3 from the House and 3 from the Senate. Is that right, Josh? It needs to be equal? Yeah, roughly equal.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, would the goal to be bring back any product if there is a product from this subcommittee back to this committee
Yes.
at the last meeting?
It has to all be accomplished by, Mr. Chairman, has to all be accomplished by our 3rd meeting in Cheyenne. Any recommendations for change in legislation or what have you. I will tell you, this is an intractable problem. I have worked on it every time we've redistricted. There are solutions to make counties have the representation that's in the Wyoming Constitution. One is to increase the size of the legislature so that the lowest common denominator is Niobrara County, which would have 1 senator and 2 representatives. And Niobrara County roughly has 2,000 people. I know it's a little bit more than that. But then that would mean that you'd have to scale up all the other counties proportionally. And if you think what that means for Laramie County with, say, 100,000 people, that means Laramie County gets 100 senators. And Niobrara, that works constitutionally if you play the math out. There's another way, and that is to have proportional voting where people's votes are weighted by their representation. But it is very unworkable for committees and other things. It might work on the floor. And that is a possibility. The third way that is that we change the boundaries of counties. I know it's way, way out there, but you could make counties roughly equal size. And then you could fulfill your constitutional amendment. Or make counties in sizes that are multiples of each other so that you can have that proportion. It's a crazy, wacky idea. I wish I had never just said those words. All the things I've offered are kind of silly, which is why I think that there's no good result to this effort, except for these people have been demanding and felt disenfranchised for decades now. It's been more than 30 years. And it's like, let's go face the music. Let's give them the options, and let's bring the high-powered lawyers from the LSO to explain the precedents and the Constitution and why we are where we're at. Because what they would really like is, if it can't be done, they want us to change our Constitution, because those words are still in our Constitution that say at least one senator and one representative. They are there. So we could put it to the people to take it out, say, let's repeal that. The sticky wicket is, what if they vote that down? What if they leave it in and we're still under those court mandates? We have no resolution for them.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the intractability of this mission. It is a mission with no success, but it needs to be done. We have to go talk and listen.
So now
And explain.
volunteers.
Yeah, now you want to volunteer. And if you don't volunteer, you're going to be voluntold, because we have to do it.
Would it be nice to have representation from that area?
Yeah, I think we should absolutely allow participation from, at-large participation from the legislators in the area.
Okay.
All of them. All of them. We couldn't really make them voting members, but we could include them in everything. And I don't think that our management council mandate provides for expenses and per diem for them, but we would invite them and allow them to sit at the table. And I think that's essential.
All right.
Is that a volunteer? He raised his hand.
No,
Anybody that spoke?
Mr. Chairman, I'm assuming that this is a subcommittee that would have to come out of the corporations
Yes.
committee.
Yes, and we have been approved for it, so.
I'm feeling like this needs to be appointments by the two chairmen. Just suggesting that.
Senator Boner.
Mr. Chairman, about the idea of 2 meetings in Eastern Wyoming, I might suggest it might just take one. There seems to be one county in particular where this is emanating from in Eastern Wyoming. And I don't think, having gone through the redistricting process, that's literally it. I think everybody else is kind of come to acceptance that, the way we've done it for the past 30 years, after some getting smacked down in the federal courts once or twice, that there's been some acceptance. I think we just need one meeting in Eastern Wyoming. That's my 2 cents coming from Eastern Wyoming.
And Senator, you do have experience from the redistricting process, so.
Well, Mr. Chairman, there's 2 senators that aren't here, so.
Yeah. But one senator is from Torrington and might be a very good person, and one senator is from Converse County, and that might be a very good, very. So if the Senate were to be a panel of Steinmetz, Boner, and Case, I'll throw that as a proposal. You can always say no. I'm just throwing that out. And then you could.
Do we have any volunteers on the representative side? There we go. Representative Weber, and I'll.
You'll serve, so we just need one more.
So we have Representative Weber, ourselves, Senator Boner. There's 4.
Yeah, we've got Josh, how serious? You've only got one on your side though, right?
Well, there's myself and then.
Oh, okay, yeah,
And then Weber.
that's 4. We can do it with 4. I nominate Gary. There's room for 2 more if anybody wants to do it. You get to go and ready to pay.
Okay.
I think that's good. And then I would add Steinmetz to balance that out. That'd be 6.
That's 6.
At 3 and 3. Poor Senator Steinmetz kind of in the middle of it. She's definitely been affected by it. Yeah.
Right.
So she can resign, but I don't know if she's listening. Then I definitely nominate her.
So that will be the subcommittee. You got those names?
Okay.
All right. And let's just have, if we can, a recap of the directions we've given throughout this meeting here.
Sir, Mr. Chairman, so yesterday, of course, was all about elections. I don't have the exact number of bills, something around 10 bills, I think, that were requested, mostly previous bills from last year, and then the one new one from the Secretary of State's office. On both electricity and 911, that was more of a report back, so no requests as far as legislation coming back, but those reports will be coming back at our future meetings. This morning on the associations, did we do anything?
It was to look at past bills and just
Correct.
present the past bills at the next meeting.
Yeah, so we will do that, Mr. Chairman. We'll look at some of the prior legislation on that. And then on public records, we did just request that bill this afternoon. That will become, or two different bills, one on the public records, then another on specific to the associations. And then on the UCC, we just got this proposed handout, but no specific direction on that yet, Mr. Chairman.
I think he's got it. I think the piece we didn't do was open meetings. Maybe we might look a little bit more about open meetings topics separately next time, just more educational.
Mm-hmm. All right. Is there anything else to come before the board or before the committee? Seeing none, we are adjourned.
Safe travels, watch for critters.